Hey, what's happening, Fargo? It's sunny out again. The rain has passed. I went outside today, and my lawn is very, very green, thanks to Top Turf and Zach Johnson do a marvelous job on my lawn. Where do we start? This weekend, I had a wonderful weekend. I keep talking about it because it's on my mind. We had my sister's memorial celebrations. It was a 3-day event, and it was a fantastic healing experience. I want to thank my nephew and niece for the fantastic job they did, and a host of other people. If I started naming them, I would be here for quite some time. But you know who you are, and just as that amount of love and support and seeing old friends and old family and just being able to heal over the death of my sister, it was nothing short of magical. So I'm in a far better frame of mind, although after we start these conversations, after we start these topics, you guys may disagree, but I have a little burr in my saddle, James, and it's in regard to one of the things that happened this weekend is I was in a lot of public settings, and I noticed that there were a lot of kids or teenagers, doesn't matter, people running wild, with their parents, running wild, and there's no discipline there. There's a certain way that you should behave when you're out in public. And I was astonished in one situation, getting coffee, and this little boy is just all over the area, and his parents are sitting there watching him mess with the condiments. And so I'm going to get some sugar, and this guy is like in my way, and I'm like, excuse me. And this dude looked at me like, no, I'm playing here. And so I was like, excuse me, can I get some sugar? And he just looked at me, and he continued. So finally, me being me, I just moved him aside with my hip, grabbed the sugar, and he goes, hey. And I was like, hey, what? And then his parents decided to get involved. Oh, sorry. And I thought to myself, if, excuse me, I have a little allergies. If I had ever behaved that way in public, my parents would have made sure that never happened. Another situation is I'm listening to these people, and they're having a conversation on their phone, and it's clearly with a teenager, and they're trying to get this teenager to do something, and the conversation is so overwhelmingly not going well for these parents. And I thought in my head, how does that happen? How is it that these parents don't have any semblance of control over these kids? And then I started thinking on a broader spectrum. I've talked about the fact that we right now have a referee shortage, right? Mm-hmm. And part of that is due to, if you've ever been to a sporting event, these parents are out of bounds, and it's not like this is a new phenomenon, but what's new about it is these parents are now impacting the game. So much so that games have to be stopped or canceled, or officials are being assaulted or berated, or there are fights in the stands. Now, when I was in high school, which was a long time ago, James, there were scraps here and there, but the parents made sure not to be a part of the game, not to affect what was going on the field. And so there's that. And I'm going to wrap this all up so you guys can understand the topic of today's show. And then lastly, yesterday I was going over, in order to do this show, I have to do homework, James. This stuff doesn't just pop off the top of my head.
You don't have a well-prepared sheet when you come in?
I do, but it's well-prepared because I have to spend, I would say, 3 hours just perusing don't get me wrong, between Call of Duty games, I'll look at various articles and stuff like that and kind of formulate an outline. So anyway, I'm scrolling through, and I come across this article about the teacher shortage in North Dakota. And one of the reasons that the teacher gave for leaving the education system is lack of control within the classroom, apathy among students, okay? Students that choose not to be a part of the learning process. So, what is this show about? We're going to talk about how did we get to the position now where nobody's accountable, particularly our young people. Now, I say all the time, there are young people in this town doing great things, but at the same time, so much has happened in this past 4 days where I've interacted with young people that just have lost their minds. And what's worse is it seems like the parents aren't interested in helping them get it back. And I'm like, wait a minute. At some point, we're going to leave this planet to these people. We're going to leave society to these people. I'm just wondering, how does that end up playing out? Now, my theory is that only 10% of the country runs everything anyway. Mm-hmm. And I call it the privileged few. Those are people who run businesses or are the head of organizations. But at some point, even those people won't be able to keep it all intact. And I wonder, where are we headed? So I was looking at it, and I always say that if you want to know about a child, start with a home. Okay? And I'm not picking on anybody, but I'm saying, there are a ton of excuses as to why these kids aren't disciplined. And I'm not talking about disciplined as saying yes or no, sir. I'm talking about common courtesy. Just the everyday, excuse me, thank you, just common courtesy. How does that happen? Now, what we do know is in the 70s and early 80s, the government started a policy of really looking into how kids are cared for, with programs called No Child Left Behind. Since that program was enacted, a ton of kids have been left behind. We see the fast tracking of kids through the education system that are unruly. It's almost like the only kids that we're going to care about are the kids that actually want to learn. And even those kids aren't getting what they need because the kids that don't want to learn are killing the classroom. Teachers can't teach because they're too busy disciplining or too busy trying to maintain order. That was one of the big things that these teachers were complaining about as to why they were leaving. So anyway, it's my contention that, a lot of people talk about we don't want big government. I'll tell you, I don't want big government involved in my household. Okay? And I don't want big government telling me how I should raise my child. I don't want anybody telling me, well, you can't, my kids got spanked. And a number of people that told me, well, you can't do that. Well, yes, I can. Now, there's a difference between spanking and abuse. And we have the three SWAT rule in my house. One was to let you know, hey, knock it off. Number two was to get your attention. And the third SWAT was to make it perfectly clear that we're not going to do that again. And what I found, James, and I thought about it, and maybe 10 times in their entire life did that ever play out. Rarely did it get to the third SWAT. And people say, well, you're negatively impacting your kids. Well, it seems to me we've done okay with our boys. By all accounts, they're fantastic human beings, and they understand where they fit in society as far as being good people, as far as understanding the social norms within a workplace, a school, or any activity, how to behave. Now, I'm not saying that's for everybody, but it's something that we have to consider. Second, when the government becomes involved in your house, and I worked in with at-risk youth for 5 years, and I was amazed at the number of people that were scared that they were going to get in trouble if they disciplined their kids. Simply put, kids have so much power. Young people have so much power within our society based on what the government has allowed that parents can't parent. And that's where it starts. Now, for those of us who understand the government, just like schools, if you ever want to get something done, go in and talk to an administrator about how you're not going to stand for this, this, and this. It usually changes. And I've been involved in those situations. I've seen those situations. Even school administrators are scared of what will happen if they actually have any teeth to their discipline policies. And I've heard that directly from school administrators and teachers. James says we're already up against a break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the breakdown in basic common decency and what do we do about it and the government's role within our lives. If you want to call in, the phone number is 701-293-9000. Welcome back to Talking to Town with Jon Adams. I got stuck in a loop here. I was looking at the weather, and it's supposed to rain tomorrow and rain Friday. I understand that the farmers need rain, but this is getting a bit ridiculous. It's awfully hard for me to get a tan if I don't have much sun to work with, James. So we're going to continue on with what I think is a glaring issue in that we need to be aware, we need to do something. With this upcoming political climate, we really need to be paying attention to who we're putting in office, locally, regionally, and nationally, because the government is affecting, a lot of people look at the government and they say, well, the government should do this for us, they should do that for us, looking for government aid and support, which I think in a certain instance that should be the case. But at the same time, if you look at it, the government is way too involved with what happens in the household, okay? And part of it has to do with extremism. It has to do with extremism, okay? And I can remember that back when I was in grade school, okay? And my brother had gotten in trouble, and the social worker came to the house and was telling my mom what she could and couldn't do. And for any of you that know my mom, I can tell you that that conversation did not go the way that social worker thought. And it left an impression on me. And the impression is that we should be responsible for what happens in our house. The government has no business looking over the fence and trying to legislate whatever or enact any policy that affects how you raise your kids. But what's more than that, the single biggest problem we have is that the youth of America, the young people of America, have been given unbelievable power that they shouldn't have. And one of the great debates that I have with friends is when it comes to discipline, where does it start and where does it stop? And my feelings are this: from 1 to 18, guess what? That's what you're supposed to do as a parent. Okay? It's not on a social worker, it's not on a teacher, it's not on anybody else but those parents. So the accountability piece is taught and learned at home. And so then the question becomes, when it isn't taught at home, what do we do as educators, coaches, and mentors? What we do is we have to be responsible for that. And they used to say it takes a village to raise a child. Well, our villages are crumbling at an alarming rate, and part of it is with the advent of social media, everybody is more me, and they're not looking out for our young people. Now, the interesting thing is this weekend, we had a fair amount of young people at my sister's event, and I was amazed at how much engagement there was with these young people. And it was fantastic, and it started me to thinking, where did that all go wrong? And like I've said on this show before, part of our issue is you look at our lawmakers. They have handcuffed our school administrators. They've handcuffed our teachers, counselors, in their ability to do the job in the way it should be done. That's the single biggest problem that we have right now, is that we are allowing our young people to run things that they shouldn't run, okay? Now, when I mentored in South High, I found it interesting that I rarely had a problem engaging these students. The reason is, I always felt that as a coach or a parent or a mentor, we have to meet these kids where they are. They have access to so much information that we didn't have, okay? We have to meet them where they are. We have to treat them like they know things. You know, when I was growing up, kids were seen and not heard. We didn't have an opinion. Heck, I didn't have an opinion until I was about 25, and even then I think my mom gave it to me. And then after I got married, my wife was in charge of my opinions, but that's okay. But the point I'm making is the way that we get back to some of these things. Now, I'm not for going back to corporal punishment in schools, although I think in some instances it would be warranted. But we need to give control back to the people who impact these young people the most. That's the first part, is we need to allow people to parent without fear of the government. You know, I have friends that say, I don't go over there because I'm afraid that I might get stopped in this neighborhood, which I think is laughable, you know? But that's the thing. People become conditioned to fear things that are nonsensical. You know, the government isn't. If you're disciplining your kid and you're trying to raise them correctly and you're trying to instill in them morals and values. Most of the police that I interacted with were like, "Hey, you know what? We're not going to come in and do this, this, and this." But it's the illusion that could happen that keeps people from disciplining and having control of their kids. That's the first thing. The second thing is looking at the behavior of adults at sporting events. You know, you look at right now, we have the whole political thing happening, and you look at the number of people that will be at, say, a rally, and they feel like they have the right to shout down somebody that's been invited to a campus to speak. There's a lack of respect for authority. But there are rules to the game, you know? But lately we've seemed to just overstep the rules and just do whatever we want. And the sad part is there's not enough people that are willing to look at the other people who are not doing things the right way, and they fail to challenge those people to be better. And I'll give you an example. Okay? If I see any young person doing something that they shouldn't be doing, I'm going to say something. And I'm not going to be like, hey, don't do that. Typically, when it comes along, I try to say, hey, maybe there's a better way to do that. You think? I address these people with respect. That's where we start when we're dealing with young people is we have to respect them. Second, we have to listen. The day of do what I say and not as I do, or, children are seen but not heard. These young people have a lot to deal with. They're exposed to things that we weren't exposed to simply because of media and the way things play out. So there needs to be that reconnection with our young people that establishes that, hey, listen, there's a pecking order. And it's funny because within our house, we know who's number one, and most men would agree. That's Mama Bear. There's no there's no doubt who's running the show in our house anyway. And if any man out there says that he's in charge, yeah, he's delusional. I've just found that talking to other married men that guess what? Women run the thing. And they'll let us, they'll give us an illusion of being in charge, but, it's just the way it is, if we're honest about it. So first, we have to get our kids to understand that there is a hierarchy within the family. There's a hierarchy when you leave your house, okay? When you're in social settings, there's a way to behave. But there aren't enough of us looking at the adults that are behaving poorly and saying, hey, man, you got to knock that off. And the funny thing is, it's not a big percentage. But I was amazed when my kids played at Oak Grove, the number of people in the stands would be yelling about this or that. And nobody would be willing to say, you know what, the refs are doing the best they can. Why don't you give them a break? I know for me, I had a rule when I was coaching. Parents weren't allowed to yell to the field unless it was something positive. That was just the way it was. And if it didn't happen, then we had fixes in place to make sure that they were compliant. But we wanted to be the focus, to be the athletes on the field. So, lastly, we need to look at who we're putting in office. And I'm telling you, man, I am amazed, even at the local level. I watched the debate a couple weeks ago, and I was floored. I was floored at the people that wanted to be on the city commission. I didn't think that what they wanted to do was well thought out. I didn't think that they, from top to bottom, they didn't bring plausible solutions. A lot of it was talking points that you had heard before. Well, if these are the people that are leading our society and they don't understand the rules to the game and they haven't thought it out, how can we expect anything to be better? So for me, I think, listen, we better get it together. We have to get it together because you know what? We're not, my generation, I'm still on the upslope. I'm not on the backside yet, but some people say I'm close, but I'm not. But these are things that we have to start thinking about. We have to get back to being a community that cares about the whole thing. And this has nothing to do with giving handouts or the free money giveaway that I've talked about. This is basic common decency. That's the single biggest thing that I think we lost in this society. Yesterday I was talking to a friend and he he broached the subject of racism. And it's funny because he made it a point to tell me that if we stop talking about it, it'll go away. James says we're up against the break. I'm going to let that marinate a little bit because I have some thoughts on it because it ties into the whole of what we're talking about today. If you want to call in, the phone number is 701-293-9000. Welcome back to Talk of the Town with Jon Adams. I see the clouds are starting to roll in. I'm getting sad, James. I was hoping to get out and get some sun on my face and sweat a little bit to get rid of this head cold or allergies or whatever I got.
Just got to head to the local gym and hit that tanning bed in the sauna, huh?
The tanning bed.
You're not a big fan of those lights?
I'm not a big fan of tanning.
Put those nice little goggles on and just enjoy yourself?
Am I supposed to wear a Speedo in there? I've never been in a tanning bed. How does that work?
I guess I don't know from experience, but I'm sure that they wouldn't shy away from it.
You know what? I'm going to take my vitamin D, and I'm going to hope that the sun stays out for a little bit and I can get out and wash some windows. So anyway, so we're going to continue on. I've been talking about the breakdown in the social contract, as it were, and a lot of it has to do with the government being too involved in the way we live our lives. And part of it is our fault because of the officials that we elect. You know, when we talk about the breakdown of teachers leaving the North Dakota school system in droves, it's funny because teachers rank, I think, 27th in the nation in North Dakota as far as pay goes. They average about $56,000 a year. And most teachers, I don't know if everybody knows this, but most teachers have a second job to make ends meet. Okay? And the article that I was reading, this gentleman had a master's degree, 10 years of experience teaching, and he was making $56,000 to $60,000, somewhere in there. So the first thing we need to do is, you know, I've said it before, teachers, law enforcement, fire department, and soldiers, they need to be paid what we're worth. We look at the number of these CEOs and all these people that are making a ton of money, and they don't contribute much societally, you know? And we see it every day. We see these large corporations paying out dividends all the while they're downsizing the people that built their company. They're shortchanging the workers that helped build the company. So, you know, if we're ever going to get back to what it used to be, we have to pay attention to who we put in office. Now, I'll move forward on this subject, but the one thing I want to give a shout out to Todd Birch. He is the principal at South High, and he is retiring at the end of the year. And I'm telling you right now, I don't know who's coming in, and it's no reflection on them, but South is losing a gem of a person. I've known Todd for over 25 years, and he is an administrator that cares about his job, he cares about his student, and he cares about his staff, okay? And I've had a lot of meetings with Todd, and I sense his frustration in leaving his position. He won't come out and say it. He's not going to throw anybody under the bus, but his job in recent years has been made very difficult, okay? Teachers, they talk about the fact that they're spending more time policing their classrooms instead of teaching. We can't have that. We need to give the people that are interacting with our kids, we need to give them the tools to be able to do the job. And that comes from, now I don't have any kids in school anymore. Christian graduated last week. I don't have any kids in school, but I'm still concerned. And we as a community, we have to take these things seriously. You know, we have to look at some of the mandates that are coming out of the school board. We have to look at some of the mandates that are coming out of the city commission. Because if we continue to negatively impact our young people or don't give them the tools, they're not going to stay here. We already have a worker shortage. You know, our unemployment rate is always so low that we're struggling to get people to come and live and work in North Dakota. So moving forward, congratulations to Oak Grove. They started a major groundbreaking project last week, and basically they're adding to the activities center. They will add an activities center and a music room. On the North Campus, the IDE Center will be replaced with STEM classrooms and a common area which will be connected to the entire campus. And the great thing about it, and I think this is awesome, the kids won't have to go outside. You know, I think it's awesome because, if you've ever had to walk from class to class like I did in Morehead State, it's a deterrent to go to class and be great. But, Oak Grove has been growing, and our kids went there, and I've said it before. What I liked about Oak Grove is they haven't been affected by the government as much as in public schools. And teachers are allowed the autonomy to do a great job when teaching. I guess this sounds like an ad for Oak Grove, doesn't it? Well, the point is that my kids had a wonderful experience there. They were college ready. They got to participate in a lot of activities. And really, I've said it before, Mr. Conant, hats off to you. One of the better teachers that we have in the state of North Dakota. There are a lot of good teachers over there. If I start naming them, I'm gonna feel like I leave somebody out. But overall, I think Oak Grove does a wonderful job, and congratulations, because these are the gems. When I talk about positivity in the community, a place like Oak Grove is a place where kids learn, but they also give a chance to be themselves. Okay, they get a chance to participate in a lot of different activities. Okay, and the level of caring that the administration and the coaches and teachers have for these kids is unparalleled. And that's from top to bottom. And there's a certain amount of accountability that can't be understated at Oak Grove. Okay? It's not all sunshine and rainbows. They have their problems. But I like the fact that they're trying to do what's in the best interest of the student always. That's what makes Oak Grove a great place to send your kid. And I'm not saying that these other high schools aren't. And I actually have my Oak Grove hat on. I got my former board member shirt on just as an homage to Oak Grove. But I'm not a board member anymore. That ship has sailed. But I wanted to bring it up because, we need to have alternatives like Oak Grove and Shanley and Park Christian if you are disenfranchised with the public school system, which a lot of people are. And so I would say if you have a young child or you're considering a switch in school, Oak Grove, a fantastic place. Your kids are going to leave with the values and the principles that will help them be great people beyond high school when they leave your home. What I like is at any time, if I wanted to, I could go to Oak Grove and I could either observe what was going on. I could go have lunch with my sons. The teachers were engaging. I never had to go seek out a teacher if there was an issue. Very good at communication there. Administrators, awesome. So with that, there's my shout out to Oak Grove. I'm gonna change the topic because I'm not a basketball fan, but I got to tell you, if you look outside, you won't see my old Dodge Ram out there. What you'll see is a big old bandwagon, baby. And I am whole hog on the Timberwolves. And I'm just excited because it's been a long time since we've had something to look forward to in Minnesota on the sports scene. I mean, I love my Vikings, but as of late, we haven't really been getting close. The playoffs are something, because it gives you hope if you just make it to the playoffs. But to get to the championship or near the championship in anything is one of those things that you follow with great interest. And I got to say, I was watching the seventh game against Denver, and I was on pins and needles, and I'm not going to lie. There was a point when the Timberwolves were down by 20, and I had that classic Minnesota feeling where, man, I can't believe this. I got all excited for the Timberwolves, and they're gonna poop the bed, and I'm like, man, I fell for it. I fell for the old "this is our year" thing, and like Charlie Brown, they yanked the rug out from under me. But something happened in the third quarter. It seems like they stepped up their defense. Ant-Man get on track, and Michael Conley, who I think is the stabilizer in this team, was magical. And then there was a run where Jokic, hey, I got to give that guy credit. I mean, he's putting big, slow guys on the map. He made an aggressive move to the basket, and Naz Reid was like, not in my house. Dikembe Mutombo him. And that started an avalanche of hope. And so now, instead of playing Call of Duty, I was watching on my computer because I have to do both because I have ADD, and and I can't just watch a game. And I'm watching, and now it's a 15-point lead for Denver. Then it's 11. Then it's 13. Then it's 9. Well, I had to put the Xbox away and put it on the big screen TV, James. And so from there, I was like, this might just happen. And the overwhelming sense of pride that I felt for being a Timberwolves fan for the first time since KG left. By the way, that was officially when I swore off Timberwolves basketball, was when KG left. That was the last year that I really paid attention to him. But this boy, what's his name? Anthony Edwards. Oh, he's got my full attention. And you know what I like about Anthony Edwards? He's a young kid, and you can tell that he's not really conforming to the good guy image. Like Michael Jordan, when he played, he never said the wrong thing on the microphone. He was very buttoned up. This kid is unabashedly emotional. And I liked after the interview, Charles Barkley says, hey, I'm coming to Minnesota. I need some restaurants. And Ant says, bring your bleep, bleep. And I thought it was awesome because it was raw emotion. It was like watching a kid play. And so with that, I was like, man, I like him because it brought personality back. He's not, I mean, he was having a poor, one of the things that happened, he was having a poor game. But you know what he didn't do, like most of these Rockhead superstars do? He didn't start forcing up shots. He didn't drive into the lane like an idiot and get stuck. He started playing harder defense, and he started dishing the rock. And next thing you know, I'm rolling, James. Well, all right. James says we're up against the break. When I come back, we're going to talk more Timberwolves football. But James says, hey, if we don't pay the bills, you're going to be out on the boulevard having your radio show. So if you want to call in and talk Timberwolves or talk about how we get back to being more civilized, call in. The phone number 701-293-9000. Hey, welcome back for the last segment of the Jon Adams Show. The Jon Adams Show. Holy cow. Maybe that's what we'll just call it, the Big Daddy Show. So next week, we're going to have Rick Becker on. And I got to tell you, one of the things that I've been saying is that he's been all over this. We should eliminate property tax in North Dakota. And up until this week, I wasn't really entertaining the idea that that would be something, but I started digging into it, and it's really interesting to me that it's definitely a possibility. evidently we have so much overspending, and we have the legacy fund and a number of other funds that could easily eliminate property taxes and be able to do it in a way that we're not going to lose any of the funding that we need for programs through taxes. So I'm going to have Rick Becker on because, here's one thing I say. This guy's running for Senate or the House or something like that. And I like my politicians to have a plan, okay? I don't need my politicians talking about what the other guy did. I don't need you trashing anybody. I want to know what you're doing, okay? My dad always said if somebody's talking about somebody else, they're trying to hide what they're doing. So, tune in next week. Let's get back to this Timberwolves thing, James. I couldn't believe, just the youthfulness of the Timberwolves. I just found that it was refreshing to watch these guys. They play for each other. That's something that we don't see a whole lot in pro sports. You look at LeBron James. He's been on 64 different teams. It always seems that he has to be the center of attention. At one point, I guess he was the GM for LA, and that's why they're in the mess that they're in. But, it's refreshing to see these young kids. You look at the interaction between Cat and Ant-Man when they have their press conferences, the way that Mike Conley interacts with Rudy Gobert. You can tell that they're having fun and they play for each other.
Yeah, there's a lot of good things about the team this year, from Rudy Gobert being the defensive player of the year and a first-team all-defensive player. Jaden McDaniels is all-defense, second team. Mike Conley very well could be one of, if not, one of the most underrated guys in the entire NBA.
Yep.
If people had been watching the Timberwolves in any capacity over the last 2 decades, or even more specifically, we'll say the last 24 months, when the Wolves went and made the trade for D'Angelo Russell, it was this spark, right? Right away, things started to flare out. They fizzled out real quick. They traded for Rudy Gobert. He didn't get along with Rudy. Rudy was playing probably his worst basketball since his rookie year last season. And then Tim Connolly, the general manager of the Wolves, made this decision to go and trade away D'Angelo Russell in a 3-team trade with Utah and the Lakers. And they bring in Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and they bring in Mike Conley, who is this seasoned veteran floor general who's been there, done that. Alexander Walker was basically just a salary match at that point, like a throw-in. And it turns out that Alexander Walker can play defense. Ask Jamal Murray. He's not a big fan of him. Ask Devin Booker. He doesn't like him anymore either. And you're going to be asking probably Kyrie Irving here in a couple of days, and he's still probably going to get 20, 25 points a game. But if he's got to take 25 shots, well, I think Nickeil Alexander-Walker probably is going to end up winning that battle. If it takes, if you get a point per shot, that's a little bit tougher to be efficient. But Mike Conley came in, and Rudy started playing a little bit better. He started improving on both ends of the court. He started being able to play a little bit more freely defensively, and became more effective on the pick and roll. And he was with somebody who he was comfortable with. He had been with for the last 5, 6, 7 years, however long he was in Utah, together with Mike. And they basically had a reunion in Minnesota. Anthony Edwards has emerged. Karl Anthony Towns hasn't necessarily taken a step back, but he's taken a step to the side and let Anthony Edwards do his thing. And there's just a lot of great things. Naz Reid being the 6th man of the year and accepting his role. He came in and he got money that would, in a lot of people's cases, be considered a fringe starter in the NBA. But he wanted to stay with this team and keep developing. And when Karl Anthony Towns got hurt midway through the season, he came in, he started, and then accepted his role back to 6th man once it happened, once Karl came back. And I've just been nothing short of incredibly impressed with the maturity of this youth-based team that you have 2 guys in this roster that are 30, Rudy Gobert and Mike Conley. Everybody else is either homegrown or there's some 25-year-old that another team didn't want that turned into an outcast that is now making a massive impact on this team.
Right? And, how many times have you seen Mike Conley take a shot when it mattered and just hit it? Mm-hmm. Or he gets a defensive stop. He's just a calming influence in that youth movement, and it always seems like he'll tuck that ball and he's directing traffic. But like you said, the hardest thing in team sports is to get everybody to accept their role and to be a cog and not be the main part of the machine. And this is definitely Ant-Man's team, and he's made it perfectly clear. Just his trash talk alone. I like my athletes to have confidence. And he said, "Hey, we're coming back to Denver, and we're gonna win." That's awesome. That's not bragging. That's just believing in yourself. And you could see it. Excuse me. There wasn't a time, even when they were down by 20 points, where it seemed like they were rattled. It almost seemed like that first half, they were playing to get to the second half. Like they knew a secret that nobody else knew, and that they were going to turn up that defense. Now, I feel like this: defense wins championships. And all things being equal, I will take a premier defensive team over an offensive team. And I think that's why you see the scores that you see is with them is they had a lot of blowouts. And it's because they play good defense. So even when their offense isn't clicking, they can hang in there long enough for their superstar to get going. And I'll tell you what, now that Rudy Gobert has added that turnaround jumper, fadeaway jumper, the sky's the limit. So, hey, I want to thank you guys for tuning in to Jon Adams, Talk of the Town with Jon Adams. I want you guys to have a great week. Think about the things that I said. Look, we're all in this together. And if we continue to be in it together, Fargo will remain a great place to live. We'll see you next week. Like I said, we're going to have Rick Becker on. And as always, stay black.